Ladies and gentlemen, for the past several years, if you're regular viewers of NewsX, you know that we have been reducing the challenges that the country has into clear, step-by-step, goal-oriented, achievable checklists. Here's a mobile phone. All of you have one, okay? This one is not Chinese, this is Korean, okay? There are three critical components in this mobile phone. The screen, which is primarily made by two companies, LG and Samsung, both based out of Korea. Then the battery, a lithium ion cobalt battery. And of course, the chipset and the communication chips, the silicon on which everything here works. This telecast from the microphone, earphones, receivers, camera, your TV or your mobile phone or laptop, wherever you're watching this telecast, and subsequently in every step, satellite internet is all running on silicon chips. So if you want to actually manufacture this mobile phone, you have to be able to make the screen, you have to be able to make the battery, and you have to be able to make the chipset. And the chipset technology from smart devices that are running from your washing machine onwards are now requiring better and faster chips from 100 microns all the way down to 2.5, 3, 4. It's a crucial requirement. Now, India has witnessed a massive leap in the semiconductor sector over the last 5 years. $10 billion worth of investments in chipset manufacturing plants is happening. The center, remember, has put in a PLI of 76,000 crores. Micron is setting up a semiconductor unit in Gujarat. And now recently, India has seen the launch of its first ever fabulous semiconductor startup. Now, what is a fabulous semiconductor startup? An organization, a company that designs the chips but doesn't make the chips. One of the biggest examples in the world is Qualcomm, which holds the patents on most of the communication chips from Android to iPhone. They are all using Qualcomm chips. Now, this company in India is called IVP Semi. It has been co-founded by an industry veteran. His name is Raja Manikam. He's an alumnus of IIT Kharagpur. He started his career as a test engineer at a US-based Texas Instruments. Over the course of a 40-year career, he's also worked at Fairchild Semicon, DTS, and Vico Test Labs. He's also been involved in the early startup of the UTAC group prior to founding IVP. Mr. Manikam led Tata's efforts to establish a semiconductor manufactory in India. He's joining us on this telecast on NewsX. Mr. Manikam, thanks very much for taking out the time to join us, and congratulations for this enterprise. Could you help us understand, sir, and I gave the example of Qualcomm, how important is design and patenting in chipset manufacturing?
I think it is very important that you own the IP and any patents that is related to it, because you can distinguish your product versus other people. But at the same time, there's a proliferation of IPs. Not necessarily that we develop our IPs, by ourselves. It could be that the IPs we can always purchase from wherever it is available.
Okay.
But certainly, I think it will add to the portfolio, the strength of the portfolio.
Okay. Now, but so you have the pedigree in the job, sir. Okay. Going back 40 years. What's IVP Semi's larger vision? What are your plans for the semiconductor ecosystem in India?
There is no large semiconductor Indian company, right? We have a lot of services company, but yes, we don't have a product company, a fabulous chip company for the matter. So IVP's vision is to create a semiconductor, Indian semiconductor company that will, which likes the branded as an Indian semiconductor company, likes the TI or ST Micro or NXP and all these the brands that we are very familiar with, right? Or the Intels and Nvidia. Mm-hmm. So our vision to be in that same league as as a branded semiconductor product company. So we will be actually selling chips and solutions.
Okay, chips and solutions. So design, assembly, chip solutions, marketing. Where does the IP figure into this in developing a brand and developing a product?
To me, I mean, currently we are licensing from Taiwan and Japan.
Right.
But really, in the bigger scheme of things, wherever the IP is available for the best product performance that we can get. So in a way, the R&D for the company is worldwide, right? So we will acquire IPs that is available in Europe or US or wherever it is that will make our product much better. So while we have our own R&D and IP building internally,
Yes.
we are seeking larger market by using existing IPs all over the world. So in
Okay.
a way, you can look at our company's R&D centers are all over the world.
Okay. All
Except
right.
they are not on our payroll.
Okay, all right. So let's talk about the center that you're setting up. For people watching the broadcast, Mr. Manikam has already secured a pre-series funding of about $5 million to get started. 20,000 square foot initial setup is being done in Chennai. Can you help us understand what the Chennai office, what the Chennai lab will be about, sir?
In a fabless semiconductor model, you don't own any production or manufacturing facilities of your own, right? Mm-hmm. You outsource the wafer fab, you outsource the packaging, you outsource the test, to very large players and so on. But I think because we are starting off and we have to assure that our product quality is top notch, is world class, and it's as good or better than most of the or the current players. I want to keep tests internally, so we are setting up our test manufacturing facility in Chennai to start with. It will be it'll be what I call modular. It will grow as we grow. Mm-hmm. Initially, we are looking at about 20,000 square feet facility. And for the power products, we will have the testers that are capable of testing power products. And as we, enter into other digital microcontrollers and so on, we will add a different type of testers. But we are going to start with the power products and a facility of about 20,000 square feet.
Okay. Now, Mr. Manikam, which then sectors, what's the target market of the kinds of chips that you intend to be developing and commissioning? What's your focus market? What's the end product likely to be?
So the key segments, we are focusing on, and what I call phase one is on the power sector, because it's a very large market, and there is a significant changes that are going to happen in how we produce power. Moving away from fossil fuels to the renewable energy, how we are going to transmit power. There's going to be a lot more distributed power generation and power storage as well. So there is a significant market in the power sector. We are going to be focusing on the power market. For example, just to give you an example, if you look at the government plans to have 50 gigawatt of solar per year, which is very, very high. 50 gigawatt is very high. Now, there is a significant amount of electronics that goes behind this generation of power and distribution and storage of this power. So we want to own all the electronics that goes behind this initiative. That's our vision to capture that market, which is available in the Indian market. Mm-hmm. So our customers will be the power producers, EPCs, which are installing renewable energy, and system makers, inverter makers, transformer makers, and so on. The second segment we are looking at is on the two-wheeler and the EV market. Okay. We're looking at the charging, again, related to power. So these are the two focus areas we have to start with. Both are, growing markets, and we believe that we have an advantage in India to serve the Indian market.
All right. So for people watching the broadcast, every time you plug in your phone, there's a charge controller that's deciding the wattage and the voltage. And then, of course, there is AC to DC conversion that's required, which is what your adapter is for. If you're running an EV or an electronic system, you want to make it smart, you want to connect it to an app, so it requires a chipset, which is broadcasting, it requires communication to the internet. So what's the plan, sir? Because I was reading your report, you're hoping on large revenue, maybe $100 to $300 million in just a few years. What are the plans going ahead?
A fabulous chip company. We will be outsourcing, and the wafers are going to come from Taiwan and Japan at the moment, because we don't have wafer fabs in India. As the fabs for the Tata fab is coming up, and probably other fabs that the government is going to announce, as they come up, we will migrate our products to these fabs. So in a way, I'm creating demand to fill up the capacity that is being created. As far as packaging goes, is the same story, where currently the packages we require are not made in India, so we will be using the Malaysia and Philippines. But as the CG Power and Tata and other people come up with the packaging capability, we will move them to India as well.
Okay.
Test, as I mentioned to you, I will do it ourselves. I mean, our own company will do it. So eventually, we want all of this to be made in India. In a way, we are trying to incentivize the people who are setting up these capabilities to urgently, move as fast as they can.
Okay.
Because we will be creating that demand to fill up that capacity.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, a multi-billion-dollar industry is emerging in India. Rajamanikam, wishing you all the best and break a leg. Let's hope that this comes true. It's of course, good for you as an entrepreneur with 40 years of experience in this field, but it's good for the country that this is happening. Keep an eye out, and let's begin that conversation here, because now joining us on the broadcast to take this conversation further, Pankaj Mohindru is with us. He's chairman of the India Cellular and Electronic Association. Jayajit Bhattacharya, president of CDEPR, is joining us. And Arun Mampari, semiconductor engineer, is joining us. He's written books on the subject. Thank you, all of you. If I can begin with you, Mr. Mohindru. Now, it's not going to be one thing. It's not going to be one company. It's going to be an ecosystem that needs to be created. We have to do the designs. We have to do the patenting, and eventually we have to do the low micron, single-digit micron capacity building. But when is the intermediary step of brand building and fabulous design? What do you make of the importance here, sir?
Rishabh, first of all, I must compliment you that for a sector which has not been in India, you've picked up a lot of knowledge. Congratulations. And I think your media fraternity needs to take a lesson from this. On Raja, congratulations, Raja. I was not able to be there, but you will have you will have our entire support. Rishabh, I want to correct a few things.
Yes.
LG and Samsung are not the only display manufacturers.
Okay.
There are about 20 companies making this thing. China is completely dominating TFT LCD now. They have, rammed the entire world market, and they dominated 90%. LG and Samsung are in OLED and AMOLED, and they have in TFT LCD. They have receded. There is no PLI on semicon. It's a capital subsidy of 50% pari passu, and the state comes up with 20 to 25%. The bill of material of a smartphone is very complex. There are more than 800 parts. If I start rattling out, there are many parts, but you simplified it into the, aggregated stuff. But I think we need to do a separate story on this. Now, semiconductor product design is the most critical for our nation. You have mentioned Qualcomm, Nvidia, these are the popular ones. But very quietly, in the last decade, China has supported 10,000 semiconductor product design companies. 10,000. 6,700 have failed. 3,300 are now in business. Very valuable, very active. If you see the verticals of semiconductors, almost every vertical is dominated by Chinese companies, except, of course, the famous ones like Intel, artificial intelligence, Qualcomm, etc. Okay. India has a few product design companies. Of course, we have a fairly large product design industry, designing for the Western world mostly. A large number of engineers are there. Arun will give you more details about it. But we have not been designing our own products. We have a few. Raja is not the first one. We have about, it's in a single digit actually, almost in a single digit. Yeah. So there is a report which I'd like to share with you where we have highlighted this as the most key sector. And in addition to the DLI, which is the 50% subsidy up to $2 million, we have suggested that the state governments support this semiconductor product design companies by subsidizing the mask set, because that is something organic, and with our traditional audit systems it is difficult to justify research which seems to be kind of in the air because our audit systems are antiquated. So
Okay.
we suggested that mass set should be subsidized. Now, which sector should India be concentrating on? Look, Rishabh, we are trying to be the next major economy of the world. So that is not an appropriate question. We have to fire on all
Yeah,
cylinders.
all of them.
We have to make chipsets for smartphones also, and rudimentary stuff for the auto industry also, solar. These are simple chipsets, and we can do them more easily. Smart meters, these are not complex. But we have to do everything.
Yeah,
And please.
you got it. So we've got to do everything, and the reason I've sort of picked up on it is because we've been trying to have these conversations for past several years now, because it is crucially important. You have to build a battery ecosystem. So either you invest in companies that are researching on sodium ion, or you find lithium somewhere in Ladakh. You have to do all of these things simultaneously. You can't do them one at a time. So let me get Arunji into this conversation. Arunji, for people watching the broadcast, can you help us understand, because we have this corpus of 75,000 odd crores. It's capex and not necessarily PLI, which is easier for people to understand. But where are we? We've seen a couple of foundation stones laid, but what is the progress we've actually made?
Rishabh, so since your question expects a lot of numbers, probably I'll give out the numbers as much as I can. First and foremost, thank you, Pankajji, for pointing out that Rajamanikam, who by the way I've interviewed 2 years before, is probably not the first, and probably the number of fabless product design companies Indian owned, by Indian owned more than 50% ownership in India, is probably more than single digit right now, because MIT itself has approved 11 design linked incentive proposals, and probably there is an equal or more number sitting there waiting for approval. So we are probably talking about 20s or 30s fabless design companies in India, which actually makes products as opposed to simply doing a design service for a non-Indian company.
Okay.
Now, with that said, the statistics in terms of how much these companies are bringing as annual revenue for India, I've seen various numbers. I've seen as less as $20 million annual, up to about Invest India on its website 3 years back said $70 million annually. However, the global annual revenue for fabless is close to $200 billion. So we are talking not even 1% of revenue being earned by Indian companies. So this is where an effort by what Sri Rajamanikam is trying to do will kick in, because he's talking about $100 to $300 million straight away. Even if you don't get there in 3 or 4 years, which I mean, I wish he gets there, but even otherwise, even if it's 6 years,
Okay.
this becomes really
Arunji,
important.
just for people watching the broadcast, can you just help me just dive a little bit deeper onto fabless? So what are we saying in fabless? Are these specialist chipsets that are being designed with a company? For example, if you're watching this broadcast, if you want a website made, or if you want some internal HR software made, you go to a designer who designs the software for you. So you can design chips that are single purpose, multi-purpose. What do we mean by fabless?
It can be anything. Fabless will include all of that. It can be specialized chips like what Nvidia is doing, specialized for artificial intelligence, or it can be very general purpose. It can even be what are called as FPGAs, which are programmable. It can be what are called as ASICs, which are application specific, like you have in your gaming chips, in your Xboxes and in your PlayStations. So it can be either specific chips for specific purposes, or it can be very general purpose chips, like what might be what IVP is targeting more, is what my guess is.
Okay,
but
overall,
to your
but
question,
the big question, once you design it, what is the quotient? For example, Qualcomm, very good at design. holds a lot of patents. Okay, I mean, all the principal phone manufacturers have some Qualcomm communication chip generally in their phones. But how much is the value unlocked in design and patent holding, and how much is actually in printing and manufacturing?
So the Semiconductor Industry Association publishes data which says about 50% of the value addition comes from design and IP. In fact, more than 50%. Their statistics is slightly mixed in terms of whether it's a digital chip or an analog chip versus a memory chip. But still, more than 50% of the value addition, IP and the design combined. About 20 plus percentage for fabrication, about 6% for packaging, about another 6% for the materials that go into it, and something around that for the equipment manufacturer. So this is how it's roughly split. So definitely the value addition in terms of the IP ownership is very key here, because that's where you make a lot of money.
Okay. Yeah.
And that's where the Indian company so far has lagged, because they do design services for companies outside India which own the IP. The IP ownership has not yet come much in India.
So the IP ownership is going to be the next big thing, because major players, the almost $1 trillion players, are that because of design and IP. I mentioned Qualcomm several times. So let me get Jayjeet for a larger picture. Now, Jayjeet, in the larger ecosystem, because it has to be an ecosystem in which government is helping, but you also need good relations with Taiwan. Simultaneously, you have the Americans who are now competing with you. If you are putting up 75,000 crores, which is about $10 billion, they are putting up $200 billion to attract onshoring of all this work. There is the China factor, whom you not necessarily geopolitically get along with. And of course, there's a national security factor. So what's the overall picture on why this is important and what we can actually do?
Rishabh, you'll be surprised to know that the global semiconductor industry per se is less than 1% of the global GDP. So the total market is about $600 billion, and India is about 5% of that global market. We consume about roughly $30 billion worth of semiconductors. And therefore, the question is, why is everybody so interested in semiconductors? Because it's a strategic issue, it's a geopolitical issue. It's not a question of return on investment. It's not a question of how big the market is. If we do not have semiconductors, many industries will start collapsing. We saw that happening during COVID. We saw what happened to the automobile industry. When they were not able to get the semiconductors in, they could not do the production. They could not supply cars. And there was a huge pent-up demand, but no supply. And that was the case also with washing machines and many white goods and air conditioners and so on and so forth. So semiconductors has become very critical in the supply chain of most modern appliances, which is where you will see the US government, be it Trump and then Biden, and then before that Obama. They all were focused on the fact that the semiconductor industry is slipping out. They formed the PCAST, which is a presidential committee on semiconductors, for that matter, and they had a continuous, unbreakable policy and steps taken to make sure that the semiconductor industry comes back to US, and US continues to dominate the semiconductor industry. China, as Pankaj mentioned, had made enormous amount of investments, not just in fabless chips, but also in actually putting up the fabs. In fact, every one of the Renaissance fabs that got sold out in the 2012, they were all picked up by China and relocated into China at a much lower cost than what the Indian government was thinking of in 2012. So the Indian government was willing to spend about $5 billion. These fabs got sold at 1/10 the cost, about $100 million each, and they took off. So China has become a dominant player in semiconductors thanks to their two-pronged approach of getting both the fabs and the fabless companies into China. India needs to replicate that.
Okay.
And unfortunately, it's a very expensive game to play. If you look at the Tata investments in Dholera that's coming up, that's over a $10 billion investment into a single plant, and it's nowhere close to a world-class scale. And also the kind of technologies that you were mentioning about, Rishabh, about single-digit micron technologies, those are expensive to get, and there are many walls that have been created to get that. And in fact, right now we're left with only one company which can provide the instruments and the machinery that can create sub 4 nanometer semiconductors, and that's based out of Netherlands.
Yeah.
And there's a huge amount of focus to make sure that they do not supply their machines to China, and probably there'll be unsaid blocks
No,
of
the government in the Netherlands had to put a bar on Chinese investments into these companies to prevent a takeover under pressure from North America. So let me get Pankaj back into this conversation. Pankaj, so now let's steer the conversation to the other half of this. Actually making the chips, printing the chips here in India, we seem to be, there's some years still to go before we can do that at scale.
No, I'd like to correct something which Arun said, which is that 50%. Now, you see, this 50% is not a standard one, that the height, the depth of the river is 5 feet and Rishabh is 6 feet, so he's not going to drown in that, in the middle of the river. In the middle, it could be, 12 feet also. So this could be 90% also and 20%, 10% also. Depends on the age and the product life cycle of the, the product.
Yeah.
Your specific question is that we should be having the wafers out by 2028, even 2027. And this is just one fab which has come in the policy at the moment. There are 3 big packing units. So we have to do a 4-pronged attack. The fabs, right? The packing, third, the talent development for the world and for India, and fourth, the semiconductor product design companies. And not in that orders, of course.
Yeah.
I think product design would be having the highest this thing. And these geopolitical global alliances are very critical.
Yeah.
And we have a sweet spot at the moment because there are sanctions against China, and that hugely benefits us. The world's focus balance in semiconductors is going to get very dispersed now. Japan is coming back into the act, right? US is coming back, fabs are being set up there, which is an opportunity for our technicians and engineers to go there and work.
Right.
So we should be training them well. And after the fourth, the fifth one, which is linked to the training and having the trained workforce, we actually need to train them on fabs. So quickly we need to put up, like what Jaideep mentioned, the Renaissance second-hand fabs which China grabbed. We need to put up these training fabs in whatever nanometer, so that the boys and girls can, actually make chips.
So I'm short of time.
And just not have reading on the blackboard.
I just want to qualify a few things. If you're talking about nanometers, up to 100, you're okay for running maybe your fridge and your washing machine. It's only for the front end, really cutting edge technology, that you need to come down into 4 or 5 nanometers. So even 100 occupies a lot of commercial goods currently in India. So any scale is better because we are currently at 0. Let me quickly get Arunji. Arunji, now ecosystem priorities, how much of the impetus has already started? Now market forces are going to drive it versus how much still has to be driven by policy?
I think definitely it's a good start, but we will still need a bit of hand-holding in terms of policy, especially in terms of clarity on what India wants. For example, the Tata fab that has already been approved, once it's fully functional, 50,000 wafers per month, by let's say 2030 or 32, it is still going to be about 0.2% of by volume of the global wafer manufacturing processed wafers. So are we enough? Do we say we're good enough with that? We'll just use that for our strategic needs. We are not looking at volumes. We are only looking at key products being indigenized, or are we looking at volume? So these are the kind of clarity that government needs to bring in. If we are looking at more volumes, definitely another $10 billion or even $20 billion of incentive will be needed. Unfortunately, the fabs are a spoiled child in terms of feeding incentive. Every government does that, so it's a spoiled child. But if so these are the things that
let
the
me pick
policy
that up
will
again.
have to
I'm qualifying this for our viewers repeatedly because it's an industry that is now emerging in India for the first time. You have strategic necessities. All your communication chips, which are used by government, which are used by the military, You don't necessarily want all the hardware made in China. There's a major controversy regarding Huawei, which is being stripped out of the UK and the US for this particular reasons. So you want to have sufficient quantity at least for those interests. Then you go into commercial interests, but then there's a third interest. And let me leave the last word then with Jaideep. Jaideep, we have the 74th ranked supercomputer in the world in India. Small European countries are at the front line of the supercomputing. Now we've reached a stage where the training of AI models is happening by the creation of AI models. Nvidia is pioneering this, that you create real world scenarios into millions per second, so your autopilots can be retrained and all this. All of this is going to require specialized chipsets. We are a long way from that, but how quickly should we be running to catch up?
Yeah, there are multiple dimensions to it, and I think 5 of them was captured by Pankaj in what he mentioned. The government is going around and putting all the existing the supercomputers together in one single grade so that you get a supercomputer in that sense. Please do keep in mind, one point in time, the Tata's Eka computer was the fastest supercomputer in Asia.
Correct.
And since then we have slipped. There hasn't been much of a focus. But by putting all of these supercomputers together, we will be able to provide a better supercomputing facility than what exists in the country, but it's still not the best in the world. Now, a supercomputer involves the skills to put together the parallel computing architecture. It involves putting the processors together. The process itself involves the design and the manufacturing, which are 2 different skill sets, largely speaking, and then having a layer of algorithms on top of it, which will help pull all these microprocessors and all these facilities together, and then enormous amount of power to really push it. To put a comparison of power of how much power is needed, one single AI data center of Google consumes about 1.5 gigawatts of electricity. That's 1/7 the total electricity that Delhi needs. In fact, even more than 1/7, because the Delhi's power consumption
Delhi is
went up.
about 8,000 during summer, yes.
Right. So that's the amount of power consumption that is needed for one data center of one company for AI. So there's a lot that needs to be done. There aren't any shortcuts. We need to put all of this together. Now, fortunately, India is not is not a basket case. We have a lot of things going for us. I think it's up to leadership to pull all these resources together and really accelerate on this front.
Okay. The reason we are, of course, having this conversation, I've had several like these, we'll keep on having them, is for 2 purposes. Okay. I'm not setting a semiconductor fabrication anytime soon, but I want people watching this broadcast, maybe watching it on television, maybe watching it online, to understand the scale of the opportunity. At the very top, we discussed the solar sector. Which itself, you're talking about 1 crore mini solar plants which are going to be set up on rooftops. All of them have to be interconnected. All of them have to be done in a smart capacity. All of them will require charge controllers and communication chips. But think about it. Beyond that, your data centers will require it. Okay, all sorts of AI computing will require it. We are not there yet, but the scale of the opportunity is huge. It is a multi-billion-dollar opportunity. And we should, if you're a young engineer out there, if you are planning to take up engineering, if you are an entrepreneur out there, look at this sector, because like space, it's developing and we have to get the ecosystem in order. I have not even discussed the front line of quantum computing because I've run out of time.